Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum said on Wednesday that she and Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney had agreed to strengthen trade collaboration, particularly in light of the tariffs from U.S. President Donald Trump, set to go into effect on August 1st.
And as countries seek other export markets, that's going to reduce the supply to U.S. markets. It's going to reduce.
Canada, Mexico, and the United States once stood united like the three musketeers of North American trade, sharing industries, building economies, and enjoying a friendly rivalry over everything from car parts to craft beer. But over time, tensions crept in. One partner began turning every trade conversation into a standoff, frequently invoking tariffs and disrupting the harmony. Quietly, the other two linked arms and started paving their own path, a billion-dollar trade corridor that left their louder neighbor watching from the sidelines. It's like throwing a backyard barbecue, then locking the fridge and wondering why the guests don't show up. While the rhetoric from Washington grows louder, inflation continues to rise, store shelves thin out, and America's auto industry loses an estimated 360,000 electric vehicles annually to strengthen ties between Ottawa and Mexico City. This isn't just a trade rift, it's a breakdown of trust. And without that trust, America risks losing more than business. It risks losing relationships. What used to be a powerful trio now feels more like a duo, with the United States left standing alone, repeating America first into an increasingly quiet room. Canada's absence isn't just symbolic, it's economic. By mid-2025, U.S. food exports to Canada dropped by around 8.5%, leaving American farmers in places like Iowa and Minnesota without key buyers. At the same time, Canadian tourist visits to the U.S. declined by 33% compared to the previous year, hitting border towns and tourism-dependent states like Vermont and Michigan hard. Breweries, inns, and small businesses are feeling the impact. The once busy economic bridge between these neighbors now sits eerily quiet. And when conversations are replaced with silence, the message becomes loud and clear. This shift didn't happen by chance. It was the result of trade discussions turning confrontational. While the U.S. administration focuses on tariff revenue, it may have lost the quieter but more essential ingredient, mutual confidence. In response, Canada didn't retaliate loudly. Instead, under Prime Minister Mark Carney, they invested over $1 billion Canadian to strengthen their own steel production and supply chains. Companies and labor unions welcomed the move. Within months, Canadian importers began turning to European and Asian markets. Canadian grocers started favoring local produce over U.S. exports. Even during peak travel months, Canadian visitors stayed home or traveled elsewhere. The economic chill is unmistakable, and it raises a difficult question. If trust fades, what does America still offer as a trade partner? An Ontario steel plant manager put it simply, "We felt like we were drowning. Now, at least someone is throwing us a lifeline." While trade tensions escalated south of the border, Canada chose a different path, calm, strategic, and quietly focused on its national interests. Instead of matching the high-stakes tariff rhetoric often seen in Washington, Canada implemented targeted policies. They introduced tariff rate quotas, capping steel imports from non-free trade agreement countries at 50% of 2024 levels, and placed a 50% tariff on anything above that limit. More importantly, Canada began prioritizing Canadian-made steel for major infrastructure and auto manufacturing projects. And even before the full rollout, business owners were already noticing the impact. A Toronto-based automaker reported that Canadian parts and suppliers were beginning to replace U.S. components in their production lines. Employees saw the shift firsthand and took pride in it. Their work was being valued again. For everyday Canadians, these moves aren't just about politics. They're about identity, jobs, and long-term economic independence. Grocery chains started quietly shifting toward Buy Canadian promotions. Shelves that once displayed American beef and produce now showcase locally grown alternatives. As one Manitoba farmer put it, "We're not just growing corn. We're planting independence with long-term benefits." Economists and analysts agree that this strategy is more than symbolic. According to PwC Canada, by 2026, these structural shifts, strengthening domestic industries, investing in infrastructure, and lowering trade barriers between provinces, could enhance Canada's overall trade stability. In fact, they suggest Canada could become North America's preferred hub for innovation in clean steel and electric vehicle production. Meanwhile, U.S. leadership remains focused on short-term tariff revenues. But while the numbers are tallied in Washington, Canada is building long-term resilience. Their trade policies act as a foundation, stable, forward-looking, and designed to reduce reliance on unpredictable negotiations. So, when Canada quietly stepped away from the traditional trio and joined hands with Mexico, it wasn't just about walking away from old agreements. They didn't just skip the barbecue, they built their own banquet hall just down the road. It's called the Northern Corridor, and it's quietly reshaping North American trade without the United States at the table. Think of it as a high-powered trade route that never touches U.S. soil. Canada and Mexico are working together to reroute nearly $120 billion in annual trade, equivalent to about 2.8% of the Midwest's GDP, around the United States entirely. This corridor directly connects Mexico's growing auto and electric vehicle battery industries to Canada's Pacific ports. Designed to handle up to 15 million tons of high-value cargo each year, it bypasses U.S. customs and infrastructure altogether. On the rail side, construction is already moving fast. Canada's Pacific Short Link, a $2.3 billion CAD rail upgrade from Prince Rupert, is now fully committed to serving this corridor. For Canada and Mexico, this is a logistics win. For the U.S., it's a costly gap. By skipping over Buffalo, New York, the corridor cuts out American logistics providers, leading to an estimated $11 billion in lost annual revenue. To further streamline the system, the two countries implemented a blockchain-based customs platform. That means no physical paperwork and no U.S. customs processing, resulting in another $3.5 billion in lost U.S. customs fees each year. Then, there's the automotive impact. A major electric vehicle battery plant once slated to support U.S. factories is now routed through Ontario and southern Mexico. That shift alone could redirect the production of 360,000 EVs per year, an economic ripple effect potentially affecting over 100,000 U.S. jobs. While the White House focuses on tariff revenues, Canada and Mexico are building a long-term solution. They didn't protest, they simply pivoted. And now they're moving forward. The unspoken message from Canada and Mexico is clear. If we can trade without relying on the U.S., why go back? The Northern Corridor isn't just a workaround, it's a strategy for long-term resilience. By building this new trade route, both nations are securing lower transport costs, cleaner energy sourcing, and stronger, more independent supply chains. Canadian steel is among the cleanest globally. Mexican EV battery plants are producing greener, more sustainable components. Together, they're laying the groundwork for future carbon trading agreements with Europe and other markets. Industry analysts suggest the corridor will remain efficient even if U.S. trade policies soften later, because the new system is simply better designed. By 2026, over $69 billion in trade is expected to be flowing through this route, and officials say the entire corridor could be fully operational by 2028. But this isn't just about avoiding tariffs. It's about building a borderless, green corridor that's future-proof and positions Canada and Mexico as the new core of North American trade. And in contrast, the United States faces growing risks of being sidelined. Once the hub of continental commerce, America could soon find itself on the edge of the map, no longer central to the supply chain. And once this corridor proves it can operate without U.S. involvement, its permanence becomes hard to ignore. Meanwhile, the domestic impact is already unfolding. As trade reroutes, U.S. industries are starting to feel the pressure. In June, inflation ticked upward again, 2.7% annually, up from 2.4%. In states like Michigan, Kentucky, and Ohio, factories are going quiet, not due to seasonal breaks, but because key components are no longer arriving. At Ford's Louisville and Ohio plants, production has slowed or halted due to shortages of critical parts, especially rare earth magnets used in electric vehicle systems. At General Motors, key plants like Warren Truck Assembly have temporarily shut down, cutting output and disrupting thousands of jobs. This isn't just about trade policy, it's about supply chain security, economic competitiveness, and the unintended costs of alienating allies. While Canada and Mexico are looking forward, America risks looking around and wondering where everyone went. The consequences are hitting hard, and not just at the checkout line. Yes, prices are rising, but the deeper issue is that factories across America are stalling, unable to restart production because they simply can't get the parts they need. It's like trying to bake a cake without eggs. Costs have gone up, but no one thought about securing the ingredients that towns once proud of their Made in Detroit legacy. Residents now feel let down, not by international competitors, but by a trade strategy that raised taxes on imports without securing stable supply chains. The promise that tariffs would revive American manufacturing feels increasingly hollow. especially as automakers like Ford and GM are forced to idle plants or delay electric vehicle production. For many everyday Americans, especially in the Midwest, the cost of living is climbing. Groceries, gas, utilities, all up. And while local factories slow down and contracts are lost, they're told it's all part of a bigger win. But it doesn't feel like one. Sure, headlines may boast about $550 billion collected in tariffs, but the real story is buried in the fine print. Lost wages, canceled shifts, and silent assembly lines. This wasn't about protecting workers. It became more about celebrating numbers.so now. People are asking honest questions. If tariffs are meant to support manufacturing, why are factories going quiet? And why are grocery bills rising at the same time? These aren't political sound bites. They're the quiet frustrations from towns left behind. Even on the global stage, trust in the U.S. is showing signs of wear. While America's partners remain at the negotiation table, including the EU, Canada, and Mexico, their confidence has faded. Recently, the European Union approved a €93 billion contingency plan to respond to proposed U.S. tariffs, targeting American exports like aircraft and whiskey. That's not posturing, it's strategic leverage. Meanwhile, Canada has started tightening its export controls on critical minerals like uranium and copper, directly affecting U.S. buyers. It's a message that speaks volumes. If you turn trade into a weapon, we'll protect the pipeline. Canada and Mexico aren't waiting for the U.S. to change course, they're building something new. Together, they're creating a modern, efficient trade corridor designed to bypass U.S. ports, customs, and unpredictability entirely. The Northern Corridor and its supporting infrastructure represent a smarter, forward-thinking alternative that end this new system. America is no longer at the center. It's being gradually moved to the margins. And as both neighbors find ways to work around U.S. tariffs, the real loss isn't just in goods, it's in trust. Across Ottawa, Mexico City, and Brussels, allies are adjusting. They're no longer anchoring their plans to U.S. decisions that can shift overnight. While Washington focuses on short-term revenue gains, the rest of the world is thinking long-term, rebuilding trust, diversifying trade, and creating stability without needing American approval. Once, trust was the backbone of America's global leadership. But now, that trust seems to be fading. And without it, tariffs become less about strategy and more about isolation. This was never just about trade fees or economic numbers. It's about relationships. True allies don't issue threats. Real partnerships aren't built on pressure. And while U.S. leadership continues to count up tariff dollars, others are quietly choosing a different path, not out of protest, but out of practicality. Because when a handshake stops feeling reliable, people stop reaching out. Empires don't fade because of prices. They fade when no one believes in the promise anymore maybe the real question isn't, how high are the tariffs? It's, who still believes in America's leadership?